Someone that's been very crazy and in the headlines in the past 2 days is Pam Bondi because she doesn't seem to grasp the concept of what free speech and the First Amendment of the US Constitution means.
Well, Pam Bondi is absolutely nuts. I could not believe when I seen it. Now, I know a lot of people are upset what happened with Charlie Kirk, but taking away America's free speech is absolutely ridiculous. And there are quite a few clips of Pam Bondi here saying that she's going to do just that.
And before we start, we're trying to get to 500 subscribers, so please don't forget to subscribe. It's the best way to help us out. And starting to sound like a lot of other legislators and people in countries that have implemented these laws and whose people are now suffering the consequences for it.
Yeah, the right wing is pushing back against this, and that's the big reason we're doing this story, and I hope a lot of other conservatives do as well. Piers Morgan mentioned this on his show and saying Pam Bondi is going too far and taking away America's free speech. That is what makes America so special, and it makes it's so special to be a U.S. citizen because we come from Canada. I know Canada doesn't have free speech. They say you do, but they can take it away in a second.
And now we live in Mexico, and we're also seeing the legislation and implementation of hate speech laws and what does hate speech means and the consequences from it as well. So
well, here
it's everywhere.
Here in Mexico, you have to make public apologies if the government doesn't agree with you or they think you've said something inappropriate for 30 days on your own X account.
Yes. But let's see first, I guess, what she said. So from Shadow Ezra, Pam Bondi now openly admits that the US government will target anyone they label as using hate speech. She says hate speech is not free speech and has no place in society, especially after what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, she sounds like the EU, the Canadian government, the UK government. She sounds like all these authoritarian leftist governments. And man, I do not like this at all.
So she initially said this on the Katie Miller podcast, and let's see.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle. There's free speech.
Okay, that was it. That being said, we will target you or anybody that uses hate speech. This is ridiculous. There is a clear and distinct line, and that is if you call for violence, that is no longer hate speech. That's actually a crime, and that's where the line is at. Short of that, you should be able to say anything you want. Maybe not at your workplace because your employer may have consequences for you because that's a private industry. But as far as the government coming in and trying to chill speech through hate speech laws, I see how that turned out in Canada, in Mexico, and all around the world.
But also she said, especially now after what happened to Charlie Kirk, Charlie Kirk himself was one of the main advocates against hate speech. And I'm sure, I mean, it's not what he would have wanted. And I think everybody and his close friends and just everybody in the space is saying this is insane.
Well, I know when I seen this, I had a huge problem with it. I immediately showed you right away, and I didn't know if other people were going to speak up about this. Yeah. In the last 24 hours, there has been a lot of independent creators kind of speaking up, and I just hope this gets into the government's ear, because if the government starts doing things like this, they are going to lose a lot of support in a time that things are really consolidating around the Conservative Party like we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm. And luckily, a lot of people are also speaking out, loud conservative voices and people just in MAGA or in this space. But from NBC News, Attorney General Pam Bondi faces backlash from the right over hate speech. And this is also not the first time in this year even that she has faced backlash for a bunch of different things. But let's see what most people are saying. So commentators in the MAGA universe have said Bondi's remarks are nonsense and at odds with what the conservative movement believes in. And it just goes to show she doesn't get it.
Well, she almost sounds like a rhino. That's a Republican in name only. New MAGA or the new populist movement knows their first principles. And one of the big first principles that Charlie Kirk espoused was free speech. Mm-hmm. The fact that she's going after this, Charlie must be rolling in his grave right now.
I mean, unfortunately, he still hasn't been put even in his grave, and they're already doing this. Well, she's already doing this. Do you want me to go into it?
Yeah, let's see who said what here.
So in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Attorney General Pam Bondi has
Okay,
pushed.
we kind of know that part.
Yes.
I want to see the reactions of the content creators if they have them in here.
Conservative pundit Tucker Carlson called the idea that hate speech is a crime a lie. Any attempts to impose hate speech laws in this country is a denial of the humanity of American citizens and cannot be allowed under any circumstances. He added, conservative commentator Eric Erickson said that Bondi was a moron and that her comments didn't reflect the law.
Well, and this is absolutely correct. And I just want to say this, the right has control of their side. So when people of authority come out and say reckless things, kind of going against the first principles, which the conservative and MAGA movement is based on, there is going to be pushback. And Trump does listen to his base. That's why so many Trump supporters do support him, because he is willing to reconsider his views. One of the big things was the jibby jab. He changed his mind on that, especially with RFK, and now they're going in a different direction. Pam Bondi needs to get a clue. I have not liked her since the beginning of this administration. I will say I didn't know who she was at first, but within a few months, I said, I do not like this girl. RFK wasn't doing a lot in the beginning. He's completely changed. He's on board and doing what he promised he would do.
So Bondi quickly backtracked, clarifying that the Justice Department would only go after speech that led to violence. And there are already very clear and specific parameters about what it means to incite violence. And there is actually a pretty high threshold that any speech has to meet before it is actually considered incitement to violence. So we already know, she should already know that. Hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment, Bondi said on Tuesday on X. It's a crime. For far too long, we've watched the radical left normalize threats, calls for assassinations, and cheer on political violence. That era is over. And again, and we've spoken about this too, it's fine if a private employer realizes that they don't want one of their employees cheering on the assassination of Charlie Kirk or of anybody else. And after realizing that, through the own volition of the employee, by posting things online or saying things online, the employer decides to fire them, they're in their right to do so most of the time, because maybe they don't want someone that seems like a lunatic working for them or working around them or teaching their kids or flying their planes. But once it crosses the threshold into legislation and actually using the governmental force to go after people for speech, then they're no different than any other country in the world that's doing that.
Well, and it's usually in the policies of the company. So
Yes.
If you do violate the policies of your company, they do have the right to fire you. Now, if they're going to make up new policies and fire you retroactively, I don't know if I agree with that. But if they make new policies and then you break those policies again, I completely do agree with they have the right to fire you because you agreed to the terms and regulations of that job. There's a reason we do YouTube full time now, and it's because we're conservative. And in Canada, when I was up there, employers did not like a lot of things that I had to say.
Yes, and I mean, they made it quite obvious what
Yeah.
you could and couldn't say. But there's also the reaction of Matt Walsh. So from Red Wave Press, Daily Wire's Matt Walsh calls for the firing of AG Pam Bondi today after she announces DOJ may prosecute Office Depot for refusing to print posters for Charlie Kirk Vigil in Michigan. Walsh wrote on X, "Get rid of her today. This is insane. Conservatives have fought for decades for the right to refuse the service to anyone. We won that fight. Now Pam Bondi wants to roll it all back for no reason. The employee who didn't print the flyer was already fired by his employer. And because the person went against the policy of Office Depot, so Office Depot decided what to do with them." This stuff being handled
Well, I
successfully.
wanted to say something,
Okay.
but I cut to that other camera. That being said, yeah, like Matt Walsh said, and a lot of people might not remember the case, but there was the case of the cake. They wanted, the baker wanted the right to refuse service to certain customers, and customers can go to another bakery or another place to print their flyers. That's the thing.
But this stuff is being handled successfully through free speech and free markets. This is totally gratuitous and pointless. We need the AG focused on bringing down the left-wing terror cells, not prosecuting Office Depot. For God's
Yeah,
sake.
and I will say this because I was watching Piers Morgan today, and a lot of leftists were talking about how the right's not calling Trump or the right wing out and Pam Bondi out about the Epstein files. I'm completely disappointed about the Epstein files, but I am still satisfied with a lot of the other things they're doing. But when it comes to free speech, that is an absolute first principle that I don't want to see the leadership of the conservative or the new MAGA movement step on.
And then Not the Bee also said, "I voted for a lot of things that I'm getting. I did not vote for this. This is the most dangerous thing I've heard an official say in a long time, and that includes the previous administration." And that is the problem. And we have discussed if something were to happen, a few weeks ago we were talking, if something were to happen, the Trump administration was getting close to the ideas of maybe using digital IDs for the border, or starting to use excuses to further their governmental control and power, which is completely the opposite of what they got voted in for. They were voted in to clear the swamp and make government smaller, not bigger, and this would just be an example of them doing exactly that, using a terrible, tragic, and violent event to go after people's rights, which is the opposite of
Yeah,
most
and I still
people.
think they're going to bring in digital currency and digital ID, but if they start stepping on free speech, that is a little bit too far. I am completely against digital ID and digital currency, so I hope if they do bring a digital currency, they leave the option open for the traditional American dollar.
And just to end with all this
Oh,
ridiculousness.
no, there's a couple clips there.
Okay.
Yeah, I want. She actually had more than that first clip that she showed you. She's restated these crazy ideas of hers, and that's why the right is going so hard against her right now.
Because, yeah, if she had just stayed on the correction and said, oh, sorry, not what I meant.
And employers, you have an obligation to get rid of people. You need to look at people who are saying horrible things, and they shouldn't be working with you. Businesses cannot discriminate. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately, that Office Depot had done that. We're looking at that.
I don't even know if she's qualified for this job. That was actually the end of that clip. I don't know if she's qualified for this job. She's supposed to be the attorney general. She's supposed to know the law inside and out. Over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, these were crucial battles that we had already fought to have the right to deny people business as a private business, and free speech was a huge thing that Charlie Kirk kind of fought for. So the fact that she's making these statements as they're declarative is absolutely ridiculous. I think she needs to lose her job and somebody more qualified needs to come in. This isn't the first incident where she kind of showed she wasn't qualified for this thing. There's been the Epstein files and there's been quite a few other incidents here.
And also talking and wanting to turn it into a civil rights issue, as she said, having Harmeet Dillon looking into it makes no sense. But to end, let's just listen to the words of a very wise man who is no longer with us. From Charlie Kirk: hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. And I think it is worthwhile to listen to his words, for her especially.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. So if you like that clip, please hit subscribe and check out Nat and the Guy live.